Hey, Devils fans, Bill Spaulding here, and you're locked on Devils with Trey Matthews.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. I have a special treat for you guys this morning. Joining me on today's episode is a person whose voice you'll hear quite frequently on MSG broadcasts. He's been calling New Jersey Devils games since 2022 and is the successor of Steve Cangelosi and also Hall of Famer Doc Emrick. He won the Jim Nantz Award in 2012 while attending the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. His voice has also been featured in the Olympics on NBC, minor league baseball, and college hockey and football. It's Devils play-by-play announcer Bill Spaulding. Bill, how you doing on this fine afternoon? The season will be here before you know it.
Yeah, Trey, I'm doing great. It's been a fun afternoon for me of doing some notes, getting ahead on some of my spotting boards for preseason opponents and early season opponents, because once the season gets going, everything gets coming so quickly. But, like meetings have started, players are getting here the next few days, and just really, really excited to get going. And as we talk here, we're 12 days away from the first preseason game. So it really is starting to feel real.
Absolutely. And I got some questions lined up from fans. We'll get into that momentarily. But as I said, you've covered a lot of sports ranging from college to the NHL and also the Olympics. Where did the love and passion for sports originate for you, and how did it lead you to this point?
Yeah, I've always loved sports as long as I can remember. Like I remember, before like going to kindergarten each day, I would want to wake up and put ESPN News on back when ESPN News was actually a thing, or I would, I go into my older sister's softball travel tournaments on weekends. When I was a little kid, I would be the guy who was there, like reciting the stats and remembering, when these teams played 3 weeks ago, they won by this score. And so, I've always loved sports. I played as many sports as I could growing up. And, I think my story, maybe it's like your story too, Trey, but I think for a lot of people in my role as a play-by-play broadcaster, there was a time in our life where we hoped to be professional athletes, and we realized that we were not gifted with some of the things that you need to be an athlete at that level. So, as I was in high school and was a average to above average high school athlete, you kind of start to realize you got to think of something else. And I had always thought in the back of my head, I wanted to be a pro athlete and then be a broadcaster afterwards. So I just skipped the pro athlete part and fast forwarded right into trying to be a broadcaster there, because I knew I wanted to be involved with sports in some way, shape, or form.
You read my mind, because that's exactly what happened to me, because I got to the college level for baseball, but I always held on to a small hope that maybe I could play independent or overseas, because I knew I wasn't going to make it to the MLB. But once I made it to my first day freshman year, I got humbled real fast. And then come my sophomore year of undergrad, I'm just like, okay, baseball is not really going to work out. I got to find a different avenue. And then I just stumbled into sports broadcasting. And honestly, I'm not going to complain about it, because I know a lot of people who ended up getting drafted, but unfortunately they never really lasted that long. Like the people who did make it to the majors, they had a cup of coffee. They never really got those multi-million-dollar extensions or things like that. So honestly, I'm perfectly content with where I'm at.
Yeah, I always say, Trey, that even though it didn't seem like it at the time, the best thing that ever happened to me was in my junior year of high school. I was a high school catcher, and like I said, it was like above average. Probably could have played at a smaller college or something, but I tore the labrum in my shoulder, and that was kind of a real wake-up call for me. And instead of making the decisions on like where I wanted to go to college based off baseball, it was the other way around. And again, that was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, even though at the time I didn't realize that.
Well, it happened to me my junior year too, but in college. So I was working out during spring break, and I sustained an arm injury. and it left a sharp shooting pain like in my elbow and my shoulder, to the point where I was like, look, to the trainers, if you can't fix it or if we can't repair it, I might need to get surgery, or I might need to go to the doctor's office because it's really hurting. And luckily they were able to fix it. But this was also during the pandemic. I caught COVID. I had to do the return to play, which was a series of small exercises each day. I had to go to the doctor's office. I had to do this and that. And on top of that, like I said, my arm was hurting me. I couldn't even really throw anymore. I couldn't reach my throws. And I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'll give it one more opportunity to possibly win a national championship. But after that, I'm done. I don't think I have the willpower to continue. And then my coach ended up leaving. And I'm just like, okay, this is my way out to retire from baseball and fully focus on my career as a broadcaster. So I guess you and I aren't so different in that sort of aspect, Bill. But going back to your career, a lot of people might not know this, but you're an East Coast native. You grew up in Elmira, New York. You attended Notre Dame High School, which then led you to Syracuse. How does it feel to be working sort of in your home area? Did you happen to grow up a Devils fan?
Yeah. It's great to live close to home still, 5 hours from here, theoretically. If you get to, I live from a town called Horsedge, just outside of Elmira, my high school, Notre Dame in Elmira. So yeah, shout out to the southern tier of New York. And I would say a great part of growing up there was because we were in this circle where we were about 3 hours from Buffalo, 4.5 hours from Philadelphia, 5 hours from New York City. We kind of got all the feeds of all the sports teams. So I got to listen to so many different announcers during the course of my time growing up. I heard Doc calling Devils games. I heard Rick Jenneret calling Sabres games. I heard Sam calling Rangers games. I heard Jim Jackson calling Flyers games. All of those, all those different feeds were being pumped into my house. And it really gave me a chance to hear a lot of different broadcasters and how they did it. And, a lot of very good broadcasters. All four of those guys that I just named there are legendary broadcasters, all in the NHL for at least 25 years. So really lucky to be able to listen to guys like that. It's great to be, again, relatively close to home. I've lived outside of a short stint after college when my first job was in minor league baseball in Dayton, Ohio. I've lived in the Northeast ever since. So it's been great to kind of get to stay in this neck of the woods when, so often for a career like you or I have, Trey, you're forced to move repeatedly.
Absolutely. For anyone who needs reference, my family lives on the East Coast. I went to grad school at Arizona State University, which, similar to Syracuse, is one of the more prestigious schools in terms of journalism. So I think Syracuse covers the East Coast, Northwestern covers the Midwest, and then Arizona State covers sort of the West Coast and also a little bit of Southwest, as we like to call it. So me and Bill have that sort of connection as well. Going back to Syracuse, during your time there, you won the Jim Nantz Award. And actually, I had someone on this show recently who was named to the first team All-American for the Jim Nantz Award. Anna Baining, she was the rinkside reporter for the Beauty League, a league that Brendan Dillon and Eric Holla also participated in. How does it feel to be named the best up-and-coming sportscaster in the country? Because there's a lot of people who want to get into this, but very few can see success because, like I said, if a lot of people want to do it, it's rather difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously awesome when it happened and, really humbling. To me, I think more so even than just about how I was as a broadcaster at that phase, I think it was really an award for just how good the program is at Syracuse, how good the people I was working with, other of my classmates and guys that were a couple of years ahead of me and had taken me under their wing and given me feedback to learn and grow. Some other broadcasters that I had built a relationship with that mentored me and gave me feedback on my work throughout the course of my first few years to put me in that position. And then the opportunities that we get at Syracuse or got at Syracuse, as this student radio station sports director, I was calling Syracuse football, Syracuse basketball, Syracuse lacrosse, home and road. So you're in these big game moments right off the bat, which really force you to learn how to perform in big games when there's pressure. It was an awesome experience. I got to meet a lot of great broadcasters because of that, and got to, get my first taste of, that big broadcast community when I went down to the award ceremony. But again, I think it was just as much about the situation I was in at Syracuse and the guys I was working with. I was most proud 3 other of my colleagues, who are also some of my closest friends that work with me at the student radio station, also were first team All-Americans that year in the top 6. So I think it just spoke about how we pushed each other, cared about each other, and helped each other bring the best out of themselves.
Yeah, and you're still on that committee that decides some of the best in the country and then ultimately decides the winner. I've sent my reel out to people like you and a lot of other NHL announcers. My mentor is the play-by-play announcer for Seattle Kraken, their radio feed, Everett Fitzhugh. And something I've learned is that every announcer has a different style. Everyone has their different preferences. When you're watching a reel, when you're assessing who should be a part of the Jim Nantz first team, second team, honorable mention, or ultimately the winner, what are you looking for in student broadcasters?
Yeah, I think, for students in particular, I think first off, there's got to be some mastery of the basic play-by-play fundamentals, time and score, if it's a radio feed, location. I look at energy and pacing, because those are the basics that you want to get a hold of first. And then once you've kind of mastered the basics, then it's when you start to paint in those next steps. How can you interweave the stories and interesting information that you've learned about these athletes? How do you show your personality? Do you have fun with your analysts? Is there good conversation? Is it enjoyable? Those are all kind of things that I look for. And I think that the folks that run the competition and go through all the auditions until they get it down to the top 6 that the rest of us then vote on. I think that that's all types of things they're looking for. But like you said, this is a subjective industry. So, something that I love, someone else might hate. Something that I'm not a huge fan of, someone else might love. And it's the same thing, for each of us as a play-by-play guy. We know that our style is not going to be everybody's favorite. And you just kind of have to lean into being you and being yourself. And that's been, I think, the best advice I've gotten over the last 10 or 15 years is you don't try to be perfect. You don't try to, do exactly the same thing as stereotypical broadcaster A. You have to have a mastery of the fundamentals, but at the end of the day, you got to be yourself. And that's what I've tried to be the last 3 years here in New Jersey as I've gotten to know all the fans, and, Dano and Sal and myself have spent so much time on the air together in our booth and get to know each other better. That's we all just try to be ourselves and have fun. And it's the same conversations we have when we go out to dinner on the road the night before games or things like that.
Before we continue today's episode with Bill Spaulding, let me tell you guys about Game Time. I've actually used the Game Time app before to purchase myself some MLB and NBA tickets. I highly recommend it. I love it. I think you will too. Priority Game Time picks. Curation makes it easier to save even more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. All in pricing. Toggling this feature shows a total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Seat views. Get a good view of your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Okay, let's get back to today's episode with Bill Spaulding. Take it away once again. You mentioned Bryce Salvador, Ken Danico. All of them have appeared on my show before. Getting you on my show, it was inevitable. We'll talk about the New Jersey Devils and questions from fans momentarily, but I want to talk about another venture, and it's a big one that you've done, which is the Olympics. How did it feel covering track and field at this year's Olympics, especially the storylines, I think most notably with Noah Lyles, and were you actually in Paris for the events?
I was in Stamford. So I was at the NBC Sports headquarters in Stamford, where they have about 70% of their commentary and production teams. So when I was on the air at 10 a.m. Paris time, it was 4 a.m. back in Connecticut. So I had a little bit of a different sleep schedule, but it is always a blast. So that was my 5th Olympic Games. And I've I grew up a huge Olympic nerd. Like some of my first sports memories are, I can remember like Michael Johnson in the 1996 Olympics. I would watch all hours of the night when NBC was covering the Olympics, and back before social media and things, I would make sure I avoided the results during the day so that I would be watching things at prime time as if I didn't know the result. So that was all stuff that I grew up loving and helped feed into my love of sport. So then to throw in the chance to get to do it and cover it now 5 different times in the last couple summer games, track and field, it's always a dream come true. It's always one of the most special things I do. And I look forward to continuing with the Olympics. Love the Olympics. And I think this 2024 Olympics was such a good experience for so many people that it's almost been like a resurgence of the Olympic movement heading toward the NHL players being back in 2026. And then obviously an American Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028.
Let's go and talk about the Devils. Summer 2022, it's announced that Steve Cangelosi is leaving MSG. How did this opportunity present itself for you to become next in line to become the Devils play-by-play guy?
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere at the start. My agent had texted me at one point and said that he had sent my stuff to some of the folks at MSG that would be involved in the talent decision. And then a few days later, texted me that they wanted to set up an interview. So interviewed, auditioned with Dano, because obviously a big key when you're filling out one of these roles is that the person you hire has to have some chemistry with the person they're going to be working with so much. So, I did an audition with Dano, got to know him a little bit. And then it was a few weeks later when I got the call that the job was mine if I wanted it. And then the whirlwind really began, re-upping my life and getting things set in a couple of months to get the season off and running and diving into as much preparation as I could. But it has been, it's been an awesome 2+ years now, getting ready to go into my 3rd season. I wouldn't change a thing about it. It's been so much fun. And it's really a lucky chance to get to live a dream right now.
Absolutely. All right. I had some of my audience members send you in some questions. And the first one I want you to answer is, what is your favorite memory from your time with the Devils so far and why?
So the easy answer is Game 7 of the Devils Rangers series in 2023. Like that was just the culmination of what was an incredible year to be a part of and have that be my first year with the way the Devils played that season. The energy that night was electric. Everything went the way it could, calling a Game 7. The nerves I felt going into that, it was like the jitters I had. It was, it was the realization in my head of the moment and the gravity of the situation. And being a part of that was just so much fun. And I think that night, our broadcast crew as a whole, including everybody in the truck, everybody behind the scenes who does so much work to get us on the air, everybody was locked in and had one of their best nights. So I think overall we had a great show that night. And actually our whole crew has been nominated for an Emmy because of that broadcast that night. So hopefully we'll get some good news in a couple months that that game will net our hardworking crew behind the scenes and everybody who was a part of that a sports Emmy as well. But I will say one other memory that really sticks out to me, and it came very early on, that I loved, was that win in Edmonton early November of 2022, when the Devils went out and swept Western Canada, and that ended up being part of the eventual 13-game win streak. But Devils scored a late goal to tie it, and then right off the faceoff, Jesper Bratt scored that game-winning goal off a set play. That was, I think, first off, the moment where all of us really felt like, wow, this could be a really special group. And I also think, like, for me, it was my first chance to have a moment like that, to get excited and to show all of you guys listening at home that I'm invested in this. I want the Devils to do well. I'm feeling it the same way that you're feeling it at home. And I think that how excited we were that night showed that to folks, and was kind of like when, as a newbie, I think some of the Devils fans realized, okay, this guy's one of us. He's here with us. And I think that went a long way into the rest of the season as well.
So you talked about the hard work for the product that was put out there, which was that game against the Rangers in the playoffs. I remember covering it. I would say that was probably a very memorable moment for a lot of people, because Devils were on death's door. They were down 2-0 in the series, and then they came back and won it in 7. And it was definitely very memorable the last few years for a Devils team that's been rebuilding for many years. What about the preparation going into it? Because I see the PR booklets all the time, and those pages are like 10 pages thick. And it's like you have some facts that you can only use for this game specifically. But as Everett Fitzhugh has told me, you're only going to use 10% of it if you're lucky, because as the game progresses, the storylines start to write themselves. Like if Jack Hughes has 2 goals after the first period, then you're eyeing the hat trick the rest of the way. You don't care like what he had going into the game. You care more about like him getting that hat trick, if that makes sense. Can you talk about the preparation going into just one single game?
Yeah, well, starting with that, I totally agree with Everett. Like you never know what 10% you're going to need. So that's why you have to prepare so much and really over prepare. And part of preparation when you're with one team like the Devils is just, building on your conversations you're having with players to advance storylines, talk about what's going on in the locker room. So as you're with a team for longer, that part gets easier and easier because you're just ingrained and living in that story. But yeah, you have to over prepare because you don't want that one night where you didn't do the 100% preparation and you don't have that one fact when you needed it. So what I do, I'm going to look down here to grab something out of my backpack for a second so I can just show a little prop here. Let's see. So I still have some old charts from last year in my bag, actually. I think I used these recently at the Devils fan club to show kind of what I do. But for each game, I have spotting boards like this. So on one side, you see the Devils here. On the other side, you see the Nashville Predators. So on those boards, there's the number, the name, height, weight, age, hometown. And then in the little boxes beneath each name is where I put bio information. So, I put like how many years each player's been in the league, how many years have they been with their team, what did they score last year, what's their career high for goals and assists, what's their contract situation, and then usually like a line or two of, interesting personal nuggets if I can that add a little extra than just the basic stats or things like that. And then for hockey, obviously, like that board, the boards are great to have, but you can only look down so much because of the pace of play. It's not like a sport like baseball where you can be looking at your notes all day. So the other thing I do before hockey games, it's almost like I'm cramming for an exam. I make flashcards. So I make flashcards with players' numbers on the front, name on the back. And we're on the airplane flying to a city. I'm sitting in my hotel room. I'm at home getting ready for a game, and I'm flipping through the flashcards, making sure I memorize numbers. And then I watch film too, the same way that players and coaches might. I watch at least the last game, if not the last 2 games that a team has played before they're coming in to play the Devils. That helps for a number of reasons. First off, I listen to their announcers, so you get to hear what their announcers are talking about, what their stories are. Secondly, I kind of try to connect the numbers to the names in my head while I'm watching. So it's almost like I'm calling it then, which helps ingrain the numbers for me. And then thirdly, you get tendencies and you can see what a team's doing well or not, which it makes it easier to talk about the Devils' opponent coming in.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, for like the spotting boards, I think I've told you this. I can't do that. Like it's just like the colorfulness, just like it just doesn't work for me, at least.
I bet if you ask any broadcaster in the league, we all do it differently. Every one of us has our own things in our boards. I know where everything is on my board. If you handed me Matt Laughlin's board across the way that he has for radio, I would probably look at it and it would look foreign to me too. Like I wouldn't know where things were on it. And same thing if Sam Rosen and I exchanged our notes before games when the Devils play the Rangers or things like that. It's just you find what works for you. Right. And even over the process of the last couple of years, I've found what works for me in terms of like what we're really talking about during broadcasts here for the Devils, because doing a broadcast for a home team feed is different than doing a national broadcast. We're talking about different things. For the most part, folks tuning into us, like they know the bio information of these Devils players. They don't need me to tell them that more than a couple times a year that Jack Hughes is in his 6th season or that his career high is 99 points or things like that. They want more like story development from game to game of what players are talking about. How are they addressing their issues and things like that. And then on the flip side, like might need some high level bio info for opponents, but people watching our broadcast care more about the Devils than they do about the opponent. So, if someone's a huge Penguins fan, they're probably watching the Penguins feed, not our feed. So our broadcast is more tailored to the Devils as well. So that's changed a little bit how I prepare over just learning from the last couple of years here. Plus just like the fact that you're seeing a lot of the same guys year in, year out makes that preparation easier as well.
Yeah. For me, I do numerical order for the players because like you said, it's so fast paced that sometimes you don't have time to like look down. So it's like, let's say I don't know a person's number off the top of my head. Let's say they're wearing number 80. It's like, okay, 80 is going to be a little further down.
Yeah.
Try to stall as much as you can. Then, you say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do it that way. For me, I try to go lines. You're not always perfectly right because there are some line changes, but I just like that because if, for example, like a player's turned in a way on the far corner that I can't quite get a look at their number, if I can see who else is out there on their line, then I at least have an educated guess of who it is. It's not always perfect, but that's to me what's worked. But as I said, you just got to find what works for you, and everybody does it differently.
Absolutely. All right, here's another question. If you could go back in time and provide play-by-play for any moment in sports history, what would it be?
I thought about this because I saw when he put this question out here on social media, I saw some of the answers that folks had. I've got a couple. I think from a Devils perspective, I would go back to call Game 7 of 2003 Stanley Cup. And the biggest reason why is my broadcast partner, Ken Danico. Like, I love that man. We've gotten to know each other really well over the last couple of years. And so the idea of that being his last game, him coming in after being scratched during that series, what that meant to him to be there, and then going out on top and winning the Stanley Cup, it would have been really cool to call that moment for my guy. A couple other ones that I think would have been awesome for me, selfishly as a Syracuse fan. One of the formative games of my Syracuse fanhood growing up with my dad is from Syracuse originally. So even before I went to the school, I was going to those games. The 2003 basketball national championship game when Syracuse finally won a national championship. And I saw my dad like jumping up and down and had tears of joy because he had been, he grew up in Syracuse and had never seen them win a championship like that. Like to call that game would have been pretty special. And then the third one would be the Miracle on Ice. Not that I would have done it any better than Al Michaels, because no one's ever going to match that Do You Believe in Miracles call. But man, what an atmosphere that must have been down the stretch, and what a moment that would have been. Just I think unbeatable to call that event.
What is the biggest challenge of jumping from hockey play-by-play to calling the Olympics, or is there a challenge?
So in terms of actual play-by-play, I would say from sport to sport, like the fundamentals of play-by-play are still pretty similar. Like who, what, where, when, why. You're answering those questions. Obviously each sport has its differences. Hockey's super fast paced, baseball's slower. There's high energy moments and low energy moments in games, and every sport has its own set of rules. But the actual play-by-play, I actually think track has a lot of similarities to hockey. There's a lot of, the sprints, big, high energy, exciting moments. Distance races, they don't have those big high energy moments for long stretches, but then you get to the end and you still get those big high energy moments similar to a goal. I would say the biggest challenge, honestly, is just the preparation. So, to call track and field at the Olympics, there's more than 1,000 athletes. I had 183 pages of Microsoft Word 11 font player bios or athlete bios that I worked on for 2 months, from like late April when the Devil season was over until early into July, and then kind of fine-tuned it from there until the Olympics. So that is the biggest challenge. And then, I've done other Olympic sports at different Olympics. The challenge is there for some of the sports that are maybe a little more niche. It's just making sure you have a good knowledge and grasp of the rules. If it's a sport you haven't called very often or seen very often, you've got to make sure you are up to date and well read on those rules so that you can then explain them in a way that folks who are watching it for either the first time or the first time in 4 years, you can explain it to them in a way that they'll understand it.
Preparation is always key. And here's a little nugget that you might want to use, because you mentioned the 2003 Stanley Cup. Pat Burns, the legendary late, great Pat Burns, was the head coach for the Devils at the time. And one of the teams he did coach for before joining New Jersey was the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah. And now Sheldon Keefe is the head coach for the Devils. And
you're making a prediction here, Trey? You saying
no? I'm not making no. I'm making no predictions. I'm making no predictions. I'm just saying, like, the last time the Devils hired a coach who previously coached the Maple Leafs, good things happened. And what team did Sheldon Keefe coach before he joined New Jersey? I forget.
I believe they're white and blue and play north of the border. Yeah.
The Canucks. I'm joking. I'm not. I'm making no predictions. This is. I'm just saying. There's a little nugget for you. All right. Someone wants to know. They want to hear your thoughts. What do you expect from Luke and Shimon this year, and what their new defensive partners will bring to their young teammates and their evolution as two of the best young defensive prospects in the NHL? Because I did hear you ask a lot of the new guys questions about like team culture and things like that. Yeah. So can you go into a little bit more detail?
Yeah, I love this offseason for the Devils and for Tom Fitzgerald, because I think Fitzy identified the problems that, again, obviously a lot of us saw them, but the problems for the squad, be it on defense, be it in goal, or be it maybe with needing to get a bit more physical. And he went to town filling all of those problems. I mean, like, almost every player coming in here is a big physical guy who can mix it up if they need to. Defensively, got a couple of the best defensemen that were out there on the free agency market. Jacob Markstrom got that deal done and got him here as well. So, to broadly put it, I think that all those guys are going to be a huge boost. And culture-wise, because you mentioned it, like, I just found talking to each of those guys at their media availabilities after signing, each one of them was a really good interview. So selfishly, I love that, because that means they'll give me some good stuff to talk about on the broadcast. But also, like, what some of the players were saying about, in particular, Brendan Dillon, all the other guys were saying they'd talked to teammates who played with him and raved about what he's like as a teammate. I've heard similar things about Brett Pesce and Stefan Nason. Obviously, Tomas Tatar has that built-in locker room presence already with this Devils team coming back. So, all that to say that I think these moves are going to be really good for Luke and for Shimon. And let's remember, like, the last month of last season, Luke was playing really high level hockey. Like, yes, there were first year growing pains, and he'd admit that, and had some rough patches. But once we got to like late February until the end of the season, not only was he still dynamic offensively, but he was playing significantly better defense as well. So I think you saw firsthand that growth that can happen with experience. And then he had the whole offseason to get a little stronger, to kind of digest what he had done in his first year and go to work. And like, Luke's a tireless worker. He is a hard working player. He's not just a super skilled guy. He works hard. So I expect him to come in and be really good this year. And again, likely being paired with a veteran like a Brett Pesce or like a Brendan Dillon. You're going to have somebody who is really reliable next to him, which then gives him a lot of freedom to be that explosive, dynamic player you want him to be. And then, I mean, similarly for Shimon Nemec, I thought defensively he was super solid for a guy who was a 19-year-old rookie last year. And again, there were moments where he made some mistakes, like anyone's going to. And I think offensively he'd tell you he thinks he can make a bigger impact moving forward than he did last year. But I mean, he's a smart, savvy guy. Similarly, with that experience under his belt, I expect to see strides in year two. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect for either of them. Like, they're still growing and learning to do, but I think they will be better players than they were last year. And again, similarly for Shimon, he was having to eat a lot of top pair minutes at times last year. And I mean, with the depth the Devils have defensively this year, it's unlikely he'll be in that situation, which should set him up better for success as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember asking Brendan Dillon about just being a leader, since he's been in the league for many years and has been to the playoffs, I think about 9 times in his career. And he's had the privilege of playing with a few legendary Sharks players, like someone like Joe Thornton. And he provided a really good answer and gave a lot of praise to some of his veterans out in San Jose. So I think this is definitely going to be a good adjustment for someone like Brendan Dillon, who can sort of just add more physicality and also eat up some more of those minutes for some of the young guys like Luke and Shimon, because a lot of pressure was put onto their shoulders. And Dougie Hamilton missing 75% of the season, that didn't help things. Brett Pesce coming in now, also doing the same thing that Brendan Dillon could do, which is eat away a chunk of those minutes. I think the Devils are heading in the right direction in terms of just forming their blue line. And I'm also excited to see Seamus Casey, what he can do, but that's going to take some time. That's a little ways away, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Michigan Wolverine players. All right, last question before we switch over to the final segment. This person asks, how do we get me, Trey, on MSG Network? But let's make it a little more broad. How, if someone wants to get on MSG and have a position like yours, what does it take to get there?
It takes luck, first off, because I feel very lucky to have had things work out the way that they did. I think it takes being someone who's worked really hard, and you say yes to every opportunity along the way. Like, I called 32 different sports from the time I graduated college until I got this job at all different levels: college, high school, network TV, freelance for an ESPN or an NBC. And you're accumulating experience, you're accumulating tape that you can use to get your jobs. And, the same way that a player needs time, like we talked about with Luke or with Shimon, like, as a broadcaster, for most folks in their job, you get better the more that you do it. So, just the reps are hugely important at first, and then, put yourself out there once you feel confident about where you are. The worst thing that can happen is somebody says no and they hire somebody else. So I think those are the things that are, if you want to be a broadcaster, but I think it is also true and applies to a lot of other jobs, like the 1,000-hour rule, where you got to get the reps, you got to work hard. Like, that's part of it. And then, being willing and confident in yourself to put yourself out there and take chances.
Yeah, and also it's important to network, just to broaden your horizon a little bit more, because you never know who you can meet and who can help you. Like, my mentor, he's been a big help for me in my career, or people like you, Bill. Like, when you provide feedback for my reels, it makes me better in more ways than one. Like, it motivates me. It's like, okay, let's make that adjustment.
Yeah.
So that way I can take it to the next level, and, never take it personal. That's the thing.
Well, that's the big thing. I find when I send my stuff to people too, I don't want them telling me the things I do well, because I, as a confident person, and you're a confident person too, Trey, like, you have a pretty good feeling of what you do well. You know what you do well already. I'm sending stuff out, and I think you're the same way. Like, you're looking for people to tell you what you could do better, because we all are unfinished products. We all want to get better. And then the one other thing I would say is, and I think this works for any line of work as well, just, like, be easy to work with. Be somebody that can roll with the punches, and be somebody that people enjoy working with. And then they're going to look for reasons to keep working with you, basically. Those would be my biggest pieces of advice for someone just trying to do a job like this.
Absolutely. And I always say, like, when it comes to constructive criticism, like, point out the things that, okay, here's what you're doing correctly, but here's what you do need to work on to take it to the next level. And like I said, when I sent my reel out to you, you helped me improve in more ways than one.
That's awesome.
The biggest thing was just speaking in the right tense, because I'm like, this sounds okay. I think my voice sounds good, but it's just like something's missing, and I don't know what it is. I don't know. And I picked up a bad habit, and I didn't even realize it at the time, just mostly because it's fast paced.
I'm glad it helped. That's awesome.
Before we close out today's episode, let me tell you guys about Indeed. I've actually used the Indeed website before to find myself some play-by-play gigs. I use it to this very day. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is the matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, messaging, so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So what do you need to do? Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Once again, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's close out today's episode with Devils play-by-play announcer Bill Spaulding. Take it away once again. All right, to close out today's episode, are you familiar with Treyisms?
No.
Okay, let me tell you the definition. Chico loves them because I'll tell you the story in a second. A saying or slogan embodying the spirit of sports commentator Trey Matthews.
Okay.
All right. Basically, when I was at Adrian College, I did play-by-play for a women's hockey team, and Chico's niece was the starting goalie. And her last name was Bar, and I gave her the nickname Bartender. So like anytime someone tried to score on her and she would make a great save, I would say like the bar is closed for the bartender, something like that. Basically, I just want to tell you some of the phrases that I might say on air, and I just want to hear your thoughts. And if you don't like them, then I will just edit it out, and we'll move on from there.
All right.
All right. First one, Mother of Mercy. This is a saying I will say like if I'm excited, but I don't say it often. Think of it as sort of like Matt Vasgersian's Santa Maria, something like that.
I like that. I like that in the right amount of doses. Like you said, you don't want to overuse it, but it's good to have something that if it's your like go-to when something's super excited, if you say that, then everybody knows, okay, something big just happened there.
All right. Hammer meet nail, nail meet coffin. This is what I say if the team I'm covering scores an empty netter goal, game is out of reach. And basically it's a play on words from the popular saying, final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, no, I get that. Good way to say it in a little bit of an interesting way, which I think we're all trying to do. Like not that we're trying to be like corny or cliche, but like, and we all want to be a little bit different, have things that we say a little bit differently. I heard broadcaster I enjoy recently, Mike Monaco, was calling the college baseball super regionals. And like the cliche is to say somebody punches their ticket. He said he updated that for modern days. He said the team scanned their barcode to get to the next level. So I like that. I like you just changing it up a little bit.
That is true, because we're at a day and age where people are scanning more. Like I know a few NHL venues, they're cashless now, and I don't know what it is for the Devils because I don't pay for my ticket. But
I think everything's digital in terms of tickets at this point. I think.
All right. Something I like to do is wordplay on a player's name. I just gave you the example of Chico's niece. All right. Here's another player. We at Adrian, we had a player named Hunter, and I would love to wordplay on her name a little bit. So she was a bona fide scorer. Sometimes I'll say like, it's open season for the Hunter, fire at will, Miss Bosher. That was her last name. And I would also throw in some pop culture references. Just because it's the middle of the night, that don't mean she won't hunt you down. Hunter scores for the Bulldogs. That's Pharrell Williams from his song Hunter.
Awesome. Again, like anything you can do that keeps things interesting. And like, also, especially if you really lean into it, like the way that you have, then like that becomes a little bit of your identity too. Like people are like, oh, this is the guy who's got some of these fun lines. What's he going to say tonight? And that's a reason that they might tune in.
All right, last couple. Your guy Dan Duva, play-by-play announcer for the Vegas Golden Knights, also a Syracuse alum. He likes this one when he was reviewing my reel. I'll say, too much pepper on that biscuit when the puck goes flying into the stands after a shot attempt that goes horribly awry.
Yeah, I think Devils fans know my go-to oftentimes is a little too much mustard on something. So I like the food references that everyone understands what you mean there. Biscuit
means the puck, and pepper. I'm a former baseball player. You should know this too. Yeah. You know the drill pepper when you're trying to take ground balls and maybe your coach just hits it a little too hard and it goes right past you. So and last one, they cracked the egg first. Like
never heard that one, but I like it. That's a good way to who's making that first breakfast, who scored that first goal.
Right, like goose egg. Crack it, or the other team is now on the outside looking in because they're now trailing.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, awesome. Bill, we talked about everything from your career to the Devils, but before you go, can you give me your thoughts heading into the season? What should Devils fans be the most excited for?
I'm just excited to see this group come together since there are so many new faces, but it feels like, again, the pieces that were brought in are the right pieces to fill some of the problems from last year. I still think like last year, I've said it before, I think 2 years ago was an everything that could go right went right season. And last year was the Murphy's Law season. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So I think that this team is closer to where they were 2 years ago than where they were last year. And I think with some of the pieces that came in, it can be a really good team. I think Sheldon Keefe is an excellent coach, and he's going to be someone who gives a new perspective to some of these players as well. And he's a coach who knows how to coach really talented players like a Jack Hughes or a Jesper Bratt or Timo Meyer. They're going to be freed up to really play at their best the way that you saw guys like Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner, Willie Nylander in Toronto. So I think it should be a really fun year. I'm expecting this to be a year that is a year where we get to keep on calling games deep into April and hopefully further beyond from there, because it's a talented group. And I think, again, with the changes that were made, it's going to be really fun to watch them all come together.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to this upcoming year. I'm looking forward to being back at the Prudential Center to cover some games, also travel with the team here and there. Bill, I presume my audience knows where to find you at, but do you still want to throw in your plugs?
Yeah, sure. So at Bill Spaulding on X or Twitter, got there at a very early time, so don't have to have any numbers or anything behind it. And then on Instagram, Bill Spaulding PXP for Instagram. Might do a little bit more behind the scenes stuff this year. I know that was something year one that people enjoyed a lot. So I'll try to add some more of that content throughout the course of the season.
Devils fans, we had Bill Spaulding on this show. Check him out this upcoming season on MSG alongside with Ken Danico and company as they bring the action to your TV set. And like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks once again to my special guest star, Bill Spaulding.
Thanks, Trey.